I opened my eyes and stared at one of those square ceiling panels you see in office buildings. It's not that it was an amazing sight, but I don't remember closing my eyes while looking at it. My eyes moved to the left side of the room, and I saw thick plastic rails on the sides of my bed. The mattress was raised under the head at an angle. Am I on a mattress? I don't remember going to bed. Strange. I heard a soft squeak and felt a draft of air gently blow into my nose. I took a deep breath and thought it smelled like disinfectant. There was a faint light coming from the window, not artificial, like from a street lamp, but warmer, so it had to be the sun. Daytime at some unspecified time. I turned my gaze forward and saw my toes sticking out from under the exceptionally ugly pale white blanket. I raised an eyebrow at that. Well, I must not be at home. I would never have such a blanket on my bed. I kept looking ahead and saw a dry erase board on the wall. I squinted to make out some of the worst handwriting I've ever seen in my life. At least I think it was the worst. My head was a little fuzzy. The inscription, as far as I could make it out, read, Mr. Douglas Comstock, you are at St. Vincent's Hospital in Portland, Oregon. You were admitted on January 30, 2016. Today's date is July 7, 2016. If you need assistance, the nurse call button is located next to you on the bed. That at least explains the ugly blankets I'm currently being kept warm under. I knew that I would never, under any circumstances, buy such terrible bedding. At least I don't think so. Douglas Comstock. Strange name. For some reason it seemed familiar to me, but at the same time it was not a name I would choose for myself. A name like Jason or Justin sounds good. Courageous, or maybe something softer like David, or maybe. Wait. I looked up from my thoughts about my toes under the terrible sheets and stared back at the board. My name. It was familiar. My name was familiar. I was in this hospital for a little over 5 months and don't remember spending any time here. My name should have meant more to me. I should have remembered that people called me that, but I don't remember that. I tried to remember my house, or did I live in an apartment? Was I married? Did I have friends? Did I have a dog, cat, parrot, or pet porcupine? Damn it. Do I often use obscene language, or is it rare? Damn it, but it seems appropriate. It's quite nice. We need to say it out loud. All this thinking gets me nowhere. I opened my mouth to speak, and nothing came out except a wheeze. At that moment, I felt movement from the right side of the room. My eyes turned sharply in that direction, and I saw sleeping woman's face, dressed in what I assume are pajamas. An oversized black hoodie with a large yellow O in the center of the chest. She was wearing hot pink fluffy pants. I call them pants, but they could have been shorts as I only saw them down to her knees the way she was sitting. It could have been fluffy shorts, but I doubted it. Her face was slightly oval in shape, with thin lips pursed into a slight grimace in her sleep. Her face was framed by said sweatshirt hood, with straight, shiny dark brown hair falling a few inches in front of her shoulders. I had a strong desire to see her eyes. I knew this woman. I just couldn't remember. My right hand moved closer and circled the button I was supposed to press to call the nurse. I didn't care about nurses. I wanted to see this woman's eyes. My hand found the plastic rail on the right side of the bed, and weakly I pulled my hand up to the top of the rail and reached for it. She was too far away. Damn it! No, it's not that. I think I don't use profanity as much, although it does seem appropriate now. My poor head was frantically trying to find an instinctive way to wake someone up. My mouth opened and nothing. Just a dry wheeze. Furious, I began tapping my fingernail on the plastic rail, the empty cracking sound of an autistic woodpecker sounding loud within the sterile walls of the pale white room. At least the walls matched the sheets. Hospitals may choose bad color schemes, but at least they go together. The woman twitched and wrinkled her nose. Her arms unfolded, and she yawned widely, stretching. I noticed that she had a cute but harmful habit of keeping her arms inside her sleeves while stretching. This is terrible for good clothes and ruins the elasticity of the fabric. It was probably therma-fit material. Probably cost her about $120 if she bought it at retail price. She smacked her lips several times, opened her eyes, and looked straight into mine. Beautiful soft brown eyes, the color of freshly poured black coffee, cooled with a splash of cream. Dark enough to stay spicy, but light enough to hug your taste buds. Eyes that can sparkle like thunderclouds and glow with happiness. Although, in truth, doesn't that describe most women? It was an accident, just a coincidence that her eyes were looking at my face, but I was so grateful that she did it. You see, in the first 10 minutes of my awakening, so to speak, I had to come to terms with the fact that I had a strange name, I was in a strange place, and I was wearing uncomfortable, poorly made underwear. But her eyes, I knew them. Moreover, I saw recognition in them. "Doug?" I heard from this angel. Wheezing was my answer. "Wait just a minute, I'll call the nurse. I don't know if I can give you water or not, and I don't want to. Just wait here." My shoulders began to shake as she left the room, and my lips curled into a smile as I chuckled huskily a few times. She asked me to wait, didn't she? Where did she think this beautiful being with soft brown eyes thought I would go? Soon a nurse came to see me, followed immediately by a doctor. They fussed a lot, and I wanted to see a woman with brown eyes in fluffy pink pants. I saw her when she ran out. Pants, not shorts, with nice curves that looked absolutely amazing. I wouldn't mind seeing her again. They adjusted the nasal cannulator from where I felt a whiff of air in my nose. First, they gave me small sponges to drink from. Then we switched to crushed ice, and finally warm water from a plastic bottle with a ridiculous flexible straw. My voice began to return after answering tests with a bright flashlight. The day and date test seemed stupid to me because I could read it behind their backs. Cough, cough. "Who was this woman that was here?" I asked in a dry voice. The doctor looked at the nurse. "She's your visitor. We need to finish these test questions first, okay?" he answered. I sighed and nodded for him to continue. "Do you remember the accident, Mr. Birkenstock?" asked the doctor. I thought about it. Hearing the word accident triggered something in my memory, but it was like scratching a brick wall. I could hear, but nothing happened. I shook my head in response. The doctor frowned and then said slowly, "Given that you've been unconscious for almost 6 months, it might be best if your memory will return on its own. Perhaps we shouldn't force it. I need to talk to one of my colleagues before we make a final decision." Damn it. My brain is fine and my body too. Well, it was fine. I want these holes in my memory to be filled. "That woman?" I asked again. The doctor nodded and smiled. "I'll get her. I just needed her to leave while we examined you. Wait here and I'll be back." The doctor also asked me to wait, all comedians. He left, and the nurse asked if I needed anything. She seemed surprised by my chuckle. I didn't have the energy to tell her the joke about being asked to wait here by a man lying in bed with tubes still attached to various parts of his body. "Wait a minute." I slid my hand under the sheets and winced. Yes, I had a catheter. I would really appreciate it if this was removed while I was still sleeping. Next time, I will definitely indicate this in the notes to the hotel if I suddenly decide to visit this wonderful establishment again. A few more minutes passed, and then the doctor brought the woman back. I could only see her profile as she shook the doctor's hand, but from this angle I could see that she had truly gorgeous curves. Her hood was pulled back, and she walked into the room, the doctor not following her. She came to my bed and took my hand in both of hers. Take a deep breath and exhale equally long. She must have brushed her teeth. She smelled of mint and lilac with a slight scent of sandalwood. Absolutely intoxicating. "I wanted to ask how you're feeling, Doug," she began. I chuckled, which made me cough a little. I squeezed her hands tighter as it looked like she was going to remove them. "Name? Please, your name," I croaked. Her eyes tightened, and I saw tears at the corners of her eyes. She blinked and looked up, slightly toward the ceiling, and sighed shakily. "Oh, this is harder than I thought. Hearing you say that. Damn." She smiled at me and wiped away her tears with the fingers of one hand. "My name is Melissa Shelton. We lived together for about 9 years. We have known each other for over 25 years, and have been friends since I was 17 and you were 18. I blinked a few times, allowing my foggy brain to process this information. Melissa continued to hold my hand and seemed to automatically know to wait, as if she knew this about me. Good sign. She probably knew me really well if she did that automatically. Moreover, I believed her. Visions of a little girl with twin ponytails and dirty overalls flashed through my head. A young woman in a peasant blouse and shorts with long hair and a frowning expression directed in my direction. Enemies? I asked. I tried not to use too many words. My throat felt like I was gargling with sand, and then I drank some alcohol. She chuckled and wiped away her tears again. Yes, of all the things you could remember, you remembered this. Melissa gently released my fingers and pulled one of those visitor chairs closer to the bed. She smiled slightly as I reached for her hand, and she took mine again. We were neighbors when we were kids. I saw you in the yard playing with your toy trucks in a muddy puddle. I was about 4 years old, and you were 5. I snuck through the fence in your house and wanted to play too. Our parents first met when we were covered in mud and building a dam before we destroyed it. I remembered that too, sort of, like a strange and fuzzy dream. Something else I wanted to know about the frowning expression on the beautiful young woman's face. Melissa must have seen it in my eyes. She sighed and continued in a tone full of regret. It was stupid back then. We were in high school. You were a senior, and I was a junior. You were my best friend. It seems so childish now, but these are not the memories I want to remember. We can't talk about how we rode mules through the Grand Canyon. I thought about it and decided it was normal. In the end, I was in a coma for 6 months. She came to visit me. I'm not very talkative now. Let her talk to me and fill in the blanks. We lived together for 9 years. I was an interior designer, and she taught college students. We owned a house in Beaverton, a beautiful 2-story house. She said she was going to ventilate my room so I can go home soon. Something didn't add up. That is, everything made sense. It just seemed a little weird. Melissa, I asked. Yes? We live together. Why aren't we married? I asked. Her eyes dropped to my hand, and she squeezed them tightly. You asked me this before. I answered you. Let's leave it for now until you get stronger. Her eyes met mine again, and I saw in them a heat that could melt lead from 20 paces. Rest assured, I love you. You're my best friend, and we've been living together for 9 years. You've been the most amazing roommate I've ever had in my life. The only roommate I've ever had in my life. I've ever had one before. I had friends who talked about roommates in college that were worse than living with a Viking barbarian. I'm grateful I'm lucky to have you. She then grinned. Plus, now you can start doing more consulting work instead of traveling to different sites. You can practice now since you'll have to stay home. Our conversation gradually died down, and I leaned back on the bed, tired. I watched as she leaned towards me and kissed my forehead tenderly, her hair cascading down to touch my cheeks like a velvet curtain. See you soon, Dougie, she whispered. See you, Missy, I replied. I heard her softly sob, but my brain was telling me that it had done enough work for today and wanted to sleep. I had a wonderful few weeks of physical therapy, which allowed me to regain most of the mobility in my shoulders and hips. Memories returned in fragments. I remember being on a motorcycle, or was it a bicycle? There was something wrong with the steering wheel anyway, and something either hit me or fell on me. It made me suddenly remember the Tom and Jerry cartoons where the piano falls on Tom or something. However, there was nothing concrete, although there were many clear memories. For example, arranging flowers and remembering the corresponding colors for each month. Same with birthstones, flowers, food, and art. Knowing when to install curtains or blinds and how to deal with contractors so as not to disturb them during renovations. And so I was allowed to return home. A bit of an anticlimactic moment, except when I met Leslie. Leslie cried on my shoulder as I sat on the couch. I saw Melissa roll her eyes and smile at me. Turns out Leslie was my girlfriend. Young woman, Leslie and Melissa said at the same time. Then they looked at each other for a moment, and something seemed to pass between them. Melissa left for the kitchen, and Leslie gave me a mischievous smile. I work for you, Mr. Binksy Comstock. It would be wrong to date you. She blushed while looking away and then tried to look flirtatious by quietly saying, although, since you're helping me transfer to another company, I could become your girlfriend in a few months. What an interesting ball. Sitting next to her, I began to remember more about her. Not everything, but I remembered late-night conversations and cups of coffee in the office. How I wanted to rip her hair out for the huge mistake she made. It seems she mistook salmon paint for pink, and disaster in our client's bathroom was narrowly averted. You could call it color crime. I don't remember having any feelings for this woman, but I put it aside and gave her a vague answer. If I ever needed a complication in my relationship, it would probably be best for it to happen after I had reached a more optimal physical state. I was out of breath just walking from the taxi to the front door of my house. Other people came to see me, but they were not important to the context of my story, so there is no point in mentioning them. The important thing is that I saw Melissa, I mean. I saw her watching me with tension around her eyes. Oh, she laughed and joked with our friends and family. She had the sweetest smile when her eyes squinted, so that they almost closed, and the tip of her nose rose a little, while her lips pressed tightly together and became thin over a smile. To simply describe it, it sounds like a terrible smile. It's probably one of those things that has to be seen to be understood. Her face turned in my direction from time to time. I assumed she was just checking me out, but the intensity in her eyes showed that she was worried. I had already promised her that if I felt tired, I would sit again, preferably on a chair rather than on the floor. Only after everyone had left did I find out what was bothering her. Remember anything else? Anything about me? Sorry if I'm pushing. The doctor said not to push. She said this in an almost apologetic tone. I just chuckled and put my arm around her shoulders, giving her a side hug as we sat on the living room couch. You're okay, Melissa. I remember your brother Arthur. I remember learning from him how to change the oil filter on my old Impala. I remember bits and pieces of Leslie. I remember your dad, but I don't remember your mom dying or the funeral. Were they good? Melissa turned a little to rub her cheek against my hand and sighed. Yes, you suggested a horse-drawn hearse since it might rain, and said it would be bad if the pallbearers slipped on the grass. You were right. You even. I organized the funeral, yes, I said, interrupting her. It was a nice little piece of information, and when the gap was filled, many other thoughts hovered in my head, fixed on this. I soon had a point of reference, and many other connections were made. I had a whole set of memories that filled in one of the blanks. However, I was left with a lot that I didn't remember. This had to be resolved over time. So far I have had a headache that won't go away. Melissa helped me up, and we walked up the stairs to my room. My taxi was late, so most of my attention was focused on the assembled people. Now I carefully examined my room, and it surprised me. A large four-post bed with heavy velvet curtains tied with gold silk cords. It was made of dark walnut with white accents on the headboard and posts. It was absolutely great, but inside of me I knew something was wrong with it. I continued to look around the room, the dark beige walls, and the ornate chest of drawers that matched the style. The walk-in closet with dark trim and shelving was a great addition. Overall, it looked like a room I would design, but still, something was off. Not that anything was obviously wrong, but it felt empty. Maybe it's because my tastes have changed, or was it simply because parts of my memory were missing that it affected my perception? Let me try to explain. I'm kind of an artist. I design residential and business spaces, comfort zones and zones designed to allow busy minds to focus on their tasks. With that in mind, as I looked around my bedroom, I could see that something was missing. This room was designed by me, so I would design something comfortable and also ease my mind to rest. Thus, one can say that something is wrong because something was not there that should have been. Clear as dirt, right? Melissa seemed to understand this because she interjected, "You always said this room was a work in progress. You were experimenting with different layouts and things." I simply nodded, looking around. We talked for a while, and she went downstairs to her room. She seemed reluctant to leave, and the room suddenly seemed even emptier as she left. Life goes on as always. Melissa and I met in the morning for breakfast, and then we each went about our own business. She taught at a local university. I drove to work, or drove until she found out, and, following the doctor's instructions and threats to lock me in the office on the first floor of the house, I decided to work from home. Leslie was a constant source of help. I started to remember more about her when she came over, if she was around. Skype was also useful for testing color schemes. She really was a very good worker. I found a copy of the letter of recommendation I wrote for her, and actually sent a few amendments to her next potential employer. However, I was thinking about asking her to stay with me and offering her a better benefits package. What stopped me was the last time she came over, and we were looking at a selection of samples laid out on the dining room table. I stood next to her and just pointed to the color called Aura Gold, which was perfect for the edges of the porcelain we were ordering for a client. She turned her head towards me as I leaned in to point, and for some reason my body kept leaning, and I found myself kissing her lips. A little voice told me I shouldn't do this. I missed this feeling. I pulled away a little. "Leslie, wait a minute, You still work for me, Leslie," I began. She interrupted me, her eyes sparkling. "I quit. From now on, I'll quit." She smiled at me mischievously. I raised an eyebrow, and she blushed. "You still work for me, Leslie, and so I won't be dating you, but I'd like to take you to dinner, and we'll see if that's possible. And when you get a new position somewhere else, we'll see how it will develop. It sounds fair." Of course, she said yes. I told Melissa the good news, and she tripped once, and I could have sworn I saw anger in her eyes for a moment. But then she smiled and told me to have a good time. She even helped me straighten my tie before I left for my date. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. My memory was returning in pieces. Hearing Melissa sing in the kitchen reminded me of boring school concerts. The only pleasant moments there were when I heard her sing with her strong alto. She'll never be a pop star, but it was always nice to hear her sing. Listening to her talk on the phone or playing cards with her. Riding together and grocery shopping together, I collected memories of how we did this in the past. There was still a lot that I didn't remember, but I knew that in time it would come back to me. Her straightening of my tie made me remember taking her to prom. No, we weren't elected prom king and queen, but I remembered dancing the night away with her and eating ice cream tacos in our nice clothes on the hood of my old Impala by the Willamette River. Something so important was missing, but I sure as hell didn't know what. "I won't drive drunk," I told her. She simply smiled that tense smile that had become her usual expression ever since I told her about my date. "Be careful, Dougie," she said, smoothing the lapels of my jacket. "I will, Missy," I replied, hugging her tightly. So, I went on a date. It wasn't bad for a date, but not particularly good either. Oh yes, there was physical attraction, but nothing else. We talked about work, about her upcoming new job, which I was sure she would get, and it seemed that the conversation was simply fading away and dying on the vine. It wasn't that she wasn't smart or that I was cold, it was just awkward. We finished dinner and danced a few times. We even kissed again at her door before she returned to the house. It all seemed vaguely familiar somehow. I got in the car and began to process my feelings as I drove home that night. This strangely familiar feeling of déjà vu was extremely unsettling. At this moment, the car suddenly turned around the corner into my lane. Her headlights seemed to be heading straight towards me in a head-on collision. I turned the wheel sharply, hitting the horn as the other driver corrected his steering and drove past. I stopped on the side of the road and turned on my hazard lights. My heart was pounding wildly in my chest, and I felt short of breath. I tried to calm down and regain my breathing. Short, quick breaths are not good. Calm, long breaths, I thought. I wiped my forehead with my hand and looked at my sweaty fingers, surprised that I didn't see blood. Flashing red ambulance lights as my body was placed on a stretcher. My broken bike helmet with my emergency information written inside like Melissa said was a good idea. Just in case, lying on her side, dull eyes read her from the inside. Name, Douglas Comstock. Blood type, A+. Emergency contact, relative, Melissa Comstock spouse. Melissa Comstock. Not Shelton. That was her maiden name before she married me. The wife is not a neighbor. Why is she? But, I remembered. I was riding my bike, a nice evening walk. I hit some gravel that ended up on the side of the road near an old cemetery along Skyline. I fell and was hit by a car. Melissa always said it was dangerous because there was almost no bike lane and the turns made it difficult for drivers who were going too fast. I should have listened to her. My wife. Melissa Missy. My wife. Why did she hide this from me? What's the point? We've been living together for months now, and she never told me. My head started to hurt, but I ignored it and started remembering. It was a blur at first, but like an old engine that just needs to be started, it began to gain momentum. I remembered the evenings spent together in the yard as neighbors. How I was so happy when Dad finished installing the swings and slides. Her cut on her thigh and torn pants due to a protruding screw on the slide. Melissa was brave and didn't flinch when Dad treated the wound. She became my best friend until I started dating Deanna Simpson, and after we broke up, she was still mad at me, until I realized it was because she wanted to date me. Our first real kiss as a guy and a girl behind the church in a small rose garden. I picked her a rose and only later found out that she had dried it in her Bible to preserve it. Our wedding night at a hotel in Astoria and early morning walks along the beach in coats and pants with bare feet as it was chilly and there was a hint of rain in the air. She got a teaching position and I started my business. Slamming doors and screams, sweet whispers and spilled drinks on the sofa, organized parties and quiet evenings alone. Just the two of us. I wiped my eyes with the sleeve of my jacket automatically, without even realizing that I was crying. My breathing has mostly calmed down. I didn't feel calm, but I was okay enough to drive. I needed to be. I needed to understand why my wife, my Missy, lied about being my wife. I returned home later than I wanted. I drove slower than usual and was especially careful now. Wouldn't this be the perfect tragedy? I just regained my memory, and on the way home to tell my wife the good news, I died in a car accident. So I drove like a short-sighted old lady. I pulled into the garage and again thought about how to approach her. It was late. She was probably sleeping. Wait until morning. I entered the house and saw her, Missy Melissa, my wife, sleeping and sitting on the couch. The TV was still on, the DVD she was watching playing the main menu of The Princess Bride over and over again, one of our favorite films as a child. I walked over and took the remote control from her hand. She moved a little as I leaned down and gently I kissed her. I knew those lips. Then her eyes opened wide and she pulled away abruptly. "Doug!" she screamed. She then continued to stare, with her hand covering her mouth, as I sat down next to her on the couch. I turned around and did a double take at the trash left on the coffee table. An empty bowl whose leftovers made it look like it was full of an excessive amount of ice cream, by at least 5 Snickers wrappers, a small box of chocolates, and an empty mug that I knew once contained hot cocoa. This was clearly how Missy consoled herself. I looked at her again, seeing her thoughts running through her head, her beautiful brown eyes. I wanted to say something to start this conversation, but I didn't know what. I knew she could sense something special, but she also seemed confused. I didn't even know what exactly I was feeling. On the one hand, I was glad that my memory returned. On the other hand, I was angry that this amazing woman was my wife and lied to me. So if you don't know what to say, it's better not to say anything. Melissa looked down at her fingers nervously. Suddenly, a thought came, and it seemed like a good way to break the silence. "When did you move out of our bedroom?" I suddenly asked. She flinched, but it seemed to me that it was because of the broken silence, and not because of the question. "A couple of days before you came home, I asked my brother to help me move some furniture." Melissa replied, looking into my eyes again. She took a deep breath, about to say something, but I spoke first. Everyone knows? Did everyone keep me in the dark? I said the last sentence with some harshness, perhaps too harshly, as I saw her eyes fill with tears. Yes, the doctor said that your memory will return with time, but there is no need to force it. She stopped and extended her hands to me, her lips trembling. Dougie, did you remember? I interrupted her again. I was too tempted to take her into my arms because I needed to know. I wanted to understand. How could you do this to me? It definitely sounded harsher than I intended. You told me a lot of other things that I didn't remember. The trip to the Grand Canyon, our families, telling me you were my wife. Would that really be too much of a shock to my memory? You could get used to it pretty quickly. I might even get my memory back faster by knowing this small but important piece of information that could connect all my thoughts. Melissa started shaking her head and whispering no over and over as she reached for me, but I held her wrists before she could touch me. Was there another reason you didn't want me to remember so soon? I was in a coma for about 6 months. Perhaps you wanted a little more time to enjoy the single life. Even sent me on a date. I kissed her, another woman. I could cheat on you. What should I think? Her reaction to the last statement made it clear that I had gone too far. Her eyes opened wide and tears started to flow. I almost thought she would be upset, but now she seemed to be trying to scratch me. No, never. You are my husband and I want you. I want you so much and I waited and waited for you to wake up. You didn't see what you looked like. They kept saying something about swelling and injuries and that your body needs time to recover. You could have been sleeping all this time, but I was awake and I had to do without you. And then you woke up and didn't remember me. You didn't remember me at all. What did you look like, your eyes? She stopped struggling to reach me and just wilted, like a puppet in my hands. Her body leaned towards me, sobbing and whispering softly. You didn't recognize me. The doctor was sure that your memory would return, and I thought I could wait a little longer, because I've already waited so long for you to come back to me. I lowered her wrists and grabbed her shoulders tightly. I still didn't understand and moved her away a little so I could see her eyes. She looked exhausted, her eyes tired and red from the tears that kept flowing. I still don't understand, Melissa. Why not tell me that you are my wife? Why not tell me? Her tears flowed faster and her voice wavered as she tried to speak. I pressed her to my chest, her face buried in my shoulder while she cried. I heard her try to speak, but all I heard was, you can't just. I stroked her hair, hugged her, and felt how she calmed down a little. She pulled back and wiped her nose with the sleeve of her t-shirt, raising her hand to do so. Melissa sighed and looked into my eyes, saying sadly, you can't just tell someone they love you. It's not something you can say, it can only be felt. Her face began to contort again. If you had never remembered, I don't know. I couldn't even think about what to do. I just knew that I wanted you to be with me because you love me. I sat, stunned. She was without me, lived as a roommate, even let me go on a date with another woman. I love you, Missy, I whispered. My wife froze. I love you, Melissa Comstock, I said more firmly. Her eyes looked into mine, piercing me, looking for oomph. She kissed me hard. Between kisses, I heard snippets of words like love you or missed you and Dougie, along with various sounds. We got to our room because the sofa was not that comfortable for us. How to end this story? It's not over. We are both alive and very much in love. I thank my stars for Missy and the love she has for me. So I guess I can end this story in the usual way. And they lived happily ever after. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.